Welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex, which connects you with the world's top independent management consultants. And I'm your host, Will Bachman. I'm so glad to be here today with a longtime friend of mine, Jeremy Bieger, who's the co-founder and CEO of Pulse Insights, a really cool company, and looking forward to hearing about what they do. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Will. Great to be here.
So, Jeremy, first, just for our listeners, give us an overview of Pulse Insights.
Sure. Pulse Insights is software that helps enterprise clients listen to what their clients and their users want and need, and helps them capture preferences so they can make better decisions in their business.
Okay, cool. And this is primarily those surveys that pop up occasionally when you're on a website.
Yep. We collect feedback in a elegant way in emails, in web sites, and also in mobile applications.
Okay, so talk to me about some of the kind of use cases for that, or and some of the you don't have to, you can sanitize it if you need to keep confidentiality, but talk to me about the types of clients that you'd serve.
Sure. So we work mostly with enterprise clients. And the interesting thing about enterprise clients is, by definition, these are companies that have been successful. They've been able to grow and become bigger and bigger companies. But the irony is that as you get bigger, it gets tougher and tougher to understand what your customers want. So as you know, I grew up at American Express, and that's a perfect example where there's so many people, but so few are able to directly interact with customers. And of course, that is what allows you to be a better, continue to be a better and better company. And so our company effectively helps solve the issue where it makes it easier to get in touch with what your customers are wanting, needing, and thinking, so that you can make optimal decisions.
Okay, so give me some examples of where in my web experience would one of your surveys pop up.
Yeah, let me actually. It's probably easier to start with where the industry came from, and then where it's evolving to.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's do that.
Um, and this actually goes back to when I was at Amex. We would often, if you, my team managed the digital servicing area, which means when you go in to log in and check and pay your bill. And sometime before my time, there was a program set up that if somebody logged in and, say, paid their bill, a percentage of those users would get an email survey 24 hours later saying, hey, what did you think of the online experience? Would you recommend us to a friend? And that was billed as getting customer feedback, because you're now able to measure what customers think. And if things start getting worse, you basically are able to measure that hey, something's going wrong, we should do something. And then furthermore, a lot of times if somebody were to give a negative score, a bad score, there would be a follow-up question that said, okay, why did you give us the score? And so then you would also sort of capture the things that went wrong. So what we call that at Pulse Insights, scores and friction, because at the end of the day, you get a score, like the result of an NPS score or a website satisfaction score, and friction, which is that you get some open-ended feedback or responses about what things didn't go well. And if you aggregate those, then you can kind of get a sense of people are struggling with X, whatever it is.
Okay.
So that's sort of where we came from, and we don't think of that as bad. We think of that as good, but we also think of it as not enough. So I guess the issue is that seeing a score go down doesn't really tell you why. In fact, this would happen a lot when I was running this team, and I would just get an email out of the blue like, hey, our score dropped 8% this month. What happened? So you had this top level score, and so then basically our team would drop all of our projects and try and figure out, like, did we is something broken? Did we launch a test? Did we launch some new feature that's not working well or people don't like? And we'd really try and draw a connection between this falling score and any work that we've done. And oftentimes we'd be like, maybe it was this thing, but we're not sure. It's really tough to create this linkage between a following score and specific work that our team did. And so then you would go through the comments and he's like, oh, let's see if there's anything in the comments. And a lot of times the comments just wouldn't give you that much. The comments are thin. There's not a lot of data. And the data you do get is not all that strong. So that's sort of where this approach falls down, which is it's not a bad thing to have a score to know what people are thinking overall and is it going up or down. But the fundamental flaw is that there's not a strong linkage between an individual contributor or even a team's work and that score. And that's kind of where Pulse Insights gets involved. That's what we try to solve.
Okay. And
And
plus,
so I'll give an example. Go ahead.
yeah, and I also imagine that, if they're sending an email 24 hours later, only I bet a really small percentage of people fill that out. And the people
Yes.
that fill it out is probably not necessarily very representative. So it's only if you had like maybe a bad experience, you fill it out. If you're really upset about it still.
That's exactly it. So we kind of have coined about 4 or 5 things that are wrong with the approach, and being out of context is one of those things. What happens when you're out of context is that, like you said, your response rates will drop, and even more worrisome is that sometimes people are answering a different question than you're asking. All right. So like imagine that part of the, let's say payment of bill, going back to that example, is the transaction that somebody fulfilled that triggered the survey to come 24 hours later. By the time somebody gets that, even if they respond, they're probably not answering about the payment, specific transaction. They're answering something much broader than what you're asking. They're asking, maybe answering about the digital experience as a whole. Maybe they're answering about the brand as a whole. And so, meanwhile, you think you're getting data about this transaction, but because it's out of context, you're actually getting bad data.
Right.
So not a lot of it and not that good.
All right.
So, which kind of leads up to, okay, so then what is a better way?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's not a bad thing to capture this kind of data, but it should be in context. So at the moment that you complete a payment, if that's what you're interested in understanding whether you're doing optimally, that's a good time to ask. And so that's what our technology allows you to do. It allows you to easily insert micro surveys or just one little question, one click to get quick feedback that doesn't get in the user's way. And that's sort of the other problem with the old approach, is that you tend to get these long surveys. And so Scott Friesen actually, when talking to him, coined a great way to think about it, which is, instead of asking a few people a lot of questions, you flip that on its head and you ask a lot of people 1 or 2 questions. And by doing that, you get a lot more data.
Yeah.
And therefore you can understand what's actually going on at a much more, a broader level, and you can go deeper.
Cool. So what types of parts of the experience are companies interested in having your tool pop up and ask them a question about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the digital world, you often will think about either key events that you want to happen on your site, or key events that are important, sort of an important part of your service. And there's opportunity in any of those. So I'll give some examples. If you are starting with the on-ramp to revenue, if you will, the acquisition flows, like the sign-up processes or the purchase processes, there's all kinds of friction in most of our clients, because they're enterprise companies, and oftentimes that means they're mature. And when you're mature, that means you have some older technology in your stack, and it's sometimes tougher to make some changes. And meanwhile, you also have high volume, and so if you can make incremental improvements in the sign-up flows, it actually results in a lot of revenue, a lot of incremental revenue with minimal incremental investment. And so optimizing the onboarding or checkout or sign-up flows is one of the first places we often will focus.
Okay.
And there are some great examples of our clients getting incredibly into people's heads about why they made certain decisions. Are they struggling with anything? What almost made them fail or almost made them leave? Or they make a decision on they have to choose between 2 options, and then after they choose one of the 2 options, just get a little thing pops up and it's like, hey, why did you choose that option? And what that allows you to do is really get inside your users' heads, every step, every field of the way, if you will, so that you can create a better and better user experience for them, and just systematically remove friction from the sign-up experience.
So tell me some examples of some things that your firm, Pulse Insights, has helped discover on the sign-up process that then companies have changed.
Sure. I'm going to not give client examples, but I will give generalized examples.
All right.
Um, so um, we've had clients come to us and say, hey, on our mobile experience, so just mobile, on step 3 of the checkout flow, we're seeing huge drop off. So on step 1, between step 1 and 2, we're seeing 5%. Between step 2 and 3, we're seeing 6%. And on between 3 and 4, we're seeing 50% drop off on our mobile. And so we're about to start this huge project to optimize our mobile experience. We know there's a problem here. And we want to help, we want you guys to help us figure out what's wrong with the mobile experience. So that's sort of the hypothesis going in. It's based on some data. We're going to fix it. We're going to invest in some technology to fix it. You help us figure out what specifically we need to fix. What's interesting is sometimes you wind up learning more than you intend. So in the case I'm thinking of, one of the questions we asked, in addition to, sort of, is anything preventing you from continuing? What types of things are wrong? What's missing? One of the questions that this client asked is, hey, where are you in your purchase process? Are you kind of early on, just sort of checking to see what's out there? Are you kind of mid-funnel where you're actively comparing options, or are you here, you're ready to buy? And this was sort of the insight where what they learned is that people on mobile were just happened to be high funnel. They weren't there to buy anyway. In other words, you could have the world's most perfect and frictionless mobile experience, and they wouldn't be ready to buy. Just because you remove friction, you're not going to suddenly make them low funnel such that they're going to convert right now. And so what was so interesting about that is it completely changed the investment strategy from let's have technology builds to reduce friction to, let's create marketing content that helps pull users down funnel to more along the lines of let's answer questions that they have. Mm-hmm. Let's give them the information they need. And so it completely changed their investment strategy by asking one simple question in the checkout.
Wow.
So I think it's like kind of a good example of how listening actively will help create optimal decisions.
That is so cool because it really is about asking the right question. If you had just focused on how do we reduce the friction at this stage, you could have put all this work into it, but not really moved the needle. But
that's exactly it.
Yeah, it was more like don't worry about the friction at all. Like do something totally different.
Do something totally different.
Yeah.
And that's sort of in your previous life. You effectively learned how to interview people. You learned how to ask the right questions to get to the heart of the matter. And I think there's some element of that in what we do as well.
Yeah.
So would you recommend us to a friend? It's not that you're not going to get bad. You're not going to get bad data, but it's just not sufficient. You need to actually get to the heart of the matter of what will help you make the optimal decision.
Yeah. So in your process, when you're working with a client on something like this, do you first sort of actually try to really understand what's going on, maybe try it out yourself, actually see all the different wireframes or see all the different screens or test it on different, Android, iPhone, different technologies to see if it even just works? And is there a bit of a kind of a diagnostic process before you recommend, oh, okay, yeah, fine, we'll just execute a survey for you?
Yeah. A lot of times we find that clients have a sense of where they want to look. Sort of a sense of something that's not working optimally, and they want to figure out how to optimize. And they even have a sense of the hypothesis. Like I mentioned before, there was a hypothesis that the mobile experience was bad because it had a high drop-off rate. And so a lot of times clients will come to us with that level of, like the problem du jour is this area, this channel, and this particular thing. And we then, on our side, we actually do a diagnostic. And a lot of times a lot of times there's the hypothesis. I gave an example of where the hypothesis was wrong. A lot of times the hypothesis is right, and we just have the data to support making an optimal decision. So a lot of times a large company, um, having the answer is not necessarily enough. You need the answer and sort of the story and organizational support to do the right thing. And so a lot of times we're helping to create the organizational support to do the right thing. I.e., here's the data. This percentage of people are saying that this is the problem, and and X would make it better.
That's fascinating. Can you sort of sanitize an example and share with us a case of that where they kind of had a idea that they should probably do X, but they needed some data to back it up, and then you help, kind of confirm that?
Yeah, sure. Let me think of one that will not give a client away. Okay, so one of our clients gives offers to their clients, their customers. And it was sort of a semi-orphaned project. You can imagine, like, this is a story I've created. I don't exactly know this is actually the story, but some number of years ago, there was this idea that somebody had that we should give our clients this loyalty program and offers, and it will make everybody happy. And they launched this program years ago, and then it sort of sat there as like semi-abandonware after that. And the internal team kind of knew that, but there's sort of like factions in the company that still think it's worthwhile of having, and those that don't think it's worthwhile. And so the team that is our client sort of knew the right answer, but needed the data to show whether to either invest in it and make it better, or whether to kill it and basically focus on like a smaller set of things and do those smaller set of things well. And so our team had the answer, if you will, but they needed the data to support that decision, and then got it, and then made the decision. And in this case, it was to invest more to make it great, as opposed to leave it as sort of this middle ground abandonware.
That's pretty cool. So you'll look at we talked some about the sign up process. What are some other places that are these moments of truth or important places in the whole digital process that you'll be asked to weigh in on?
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a great question. And so increasingly, it's at important digital touch points. So if you think about important touch points within a customer's journey, sign up is certainly the first. But then right after sign up, there's this really risky territory where clients could become have a great experience, become active users and loyal, or just sort of like never quite get the habit, and despite the fact you got to sign up, it doesn't turn into a high value customer. And that's sort of the world of early engagement and seamless onboarding. And so if you can do those things well, you basically, all this hard work to get the customer in the door, you can sort of have them be on the right path versus the wrong path. And so optimizing the early engagement process or onboarding process is the next place that we tend to focus.
Okay.
Then after that, it's about loyalty. So you have a customer, and you need to understand what makes them happy, what their preferences are. And so we focus very much on the loyalty areas within companies. And some of that tends to be also a little bit more transactional. So like we work heavily with digital transformation teams. And a lot of times what that is taking processes that used to be on paper, or just more like transactional, like turning off paper statements and getting our clients to use email statements, and trying to understand how to make that process go faster. How do you make digital transformation happen faster? And so as you see, even just here, we've talked through about 4 or 5 functions within a company. The other 2 that we work very heavily with is product. So how do we build the right features and make the right product that our customers love? That's a perfect place for customer feedback. And capturing that kind of data in context is the perfect time to capture the feedback. When someone's using the digital product or interacting with it, that's the time to ask. And so that's what we help our clients do in terms of optimizing their products. And then hand in hand with product is marketing. So what questions do people have as they're shopping? How do we help answer those questions? How do we help differentiate from our competition? And so getting a large base of users to say what they think helps our clients optimize their marketing. And then I guess I'll also just say that channels is also important. So we've talked a lot about web, but every company we work with doesn't have their interactions with their clients in one channel. It's a cross channel. So the same user will interact via app sometimes, and then via website, and then of course they'll get emails and interact via email. And so being able to collect feedback cross channel is also key. So you're optimizing different channels as well as the overall function.
And I imagine social media as well, like
And social media as well.
Twitter. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And talk to me a little bit about how your firm goes to market. So how does your firm go out and develop, these large corporate clients?
So enterprise software is very much a sales-driven process, with a little bit of marketing support to help, just help educate clients in the sales process about what they can be doing and ways to think about customer feedback that are perhaps a little bit new or different than what they're used to, and why those ways are different. So that's the marketing support. But the reality is that selling enterprise software is a hand-to-hand, one-to-one relationship building process that helps match, where we match our solutions and software with needs of our clients. Yeah. So very sales focused.
And can you share anything about that, like what you've learned over the years about how that works? Do you, proactively identify within a big cable company or telecom or something? How do you identify who the buyer is? How do you get in front of that person? Do you, just email them? Do you try to call them? Do you connect with them on LinkedIn? Like, how do you get in front of the right buyers?
Yep. So our process. So growing up, 3 of our co-founders grew up at large companies and sort of understood the buying process from the other side of the table. Mm-hmm. And the key thing that we learned is that something being a good solution is not enough. It really is about organizational buy-in. And the cost is not just the monetary cost of paying the check, paying the invoice, but rather the cost of switching and taking your team's limited bandwidth off of something else and putting it on this. And so we really focus on the fact that there's multiple stakeholders and they all have slightly different needs, and we try to help sort of both either satisfy concerns or show the upside for multiple groups in the sales process, about what they get out of working with Pulse Insights versus what they're doing now. And then in terms of the process, it's I don't know what percentage, maybe 40% of our current clients come from existing relationships, people that we've worked with in the past and worked well together, and are now at a different company, and basically say, hey, this is part of my. Like, we have some clients that have brought us into 3 different companies, and so that person leaves and joins a new role, and they have a toolbox of things that they know works well, relationships that people they can trust, and like firms they work with that will help level up their new company. And so we're now part of that toolbox that companies bring into new companies. But it started, the original deal started from personal relationships from working together, for maybe about 40%. And for the other 60%, that we do some email-based outreach to the types of roles that would buy Pulse Insights.
Mm-hmm. So email-based outreach, and I've seen some people try to get fancy with that. They'll maybe send a custom video message or something highly, it's so hard to break through on the email. Have you developed any techniques, or maybe even used your own knowledge of what works and what doesn't in terms of that approach?
Yeah, to some extent. We've tried a lot of things. We have some active test and learn, sort of baked into the way we do things is test and learn. And so we're constantly trying different techniques and, like frequencies and content. And we have done some video content, like you mentioned. And so we're always trying to just inch up our open rates and meeting rates from emails as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't know if I have an answer for what works. Nothing so clear that I could say, if a firm is selling enterprise software, here's what you should do. I don't think I have anything that's quite that concise.
Yeah.
Or
But it's interesting that such a large percentage of your business has come from existing relationships. It shows the importance of that. And then I imagine that the other um, chunk, it's also probably was really important that you had those or those cases to show. That you had you know
absolutely,
examples to show. Right?
yeah. I mean, understandably so. If when you're sitting on that side of the table, which the other side of the table, which I recall clearly, you get bombarded, and so your guard is up.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that can let the guard down is positive experiences in similar industries from people that you trust or respect. And so that's probably one that is really important for us.
Yeah.
Good clients beget good clients. But it's not just the logo; it's creating value for those clients and basically saying that we can also help your company be more customer centric, which is really what we're trying to help do.
So for our listeners who may not be, necessarily digital marketing experts, but maybe, it's a consultant who's serving a company, what are some things, just some basic questions that we should be asking ourselves and asking our clients about their whole their digital world that they've created, their website, and you mentioned the email and so forth. What are some questions to think about that might suggest opportunities or might suggest challenges? What are the metrics to look at, the questions to ask,
Sure.
to kind of start discussions on areas of opportunity?
Yeah. Okay. So we often will start, depending on how mature our client is, we will often start from ground zero. And ground zero is very quickly just getting a baseline for, say, let's just pick website for now. On site, who are you? Like, our enterprises, by nature of being an enterprise, serve multiple audiences. Are you a consumer? Are you a business? And then within that, what are you trying to do here? What and then furthermore, were you able to do that? Let's just get a baseline and say, this group is struggling, this group is pretty happy, and that tells you within a couple of weeks you understand where your opportunities are, and that is really step one, so you can know where to start digging further. And we do similar things in app as well. Like, what are you trying to do today? Were you able to do it? And then you find out which things are working well and which things are working less well. And that really is pretty much as you need to get started, because after that, what happens is it's self-creating. Like you get some feedback, you learn some things, and then you layer in a little bit of curiosity, which is, I wonder if we should ask this or that or learn that. And from there, it takes off like wildfire, because then we find that it's almost addicting to be able to very quickly understand what people want to almost any question in your mind. And so what we, on the consulting side, on the professional services side, what we really help do is help guide the learning such that you take all the excitement about all the things you could learn, and we help prioritize it to link it to what do you have control and budget to invest in, so that when you learn this thing, you can actually optimize your business. You can actually execute. Because a lot of times, one of the other challenges, which is sort of outside software, but definitely a challenge in our industry, is that having information about what people want is one thing, and being able to execute well with that information and make an optimal decision or do the right thing with that data is quite a bit tougher. Like sometimes you go to companies like, yeah, we know this stinks, but you need to actually be able to do something. You have to execute to be a better company. And so we try to help figure out to help learn things where there's appetite and ability to actually execute to improve the company.
Where do you see this whole space evolving in terms of being able to measure what customers feel about a website? Do you see it continuing to be sort of the one question surveys, or are there other things that might even just be monitoring where people's mouse cursor is, and then kind of based on their behavior. Where do you see this space evolving over time?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there actually is a lot of the last thing you just mentioned, which is the linking of data between what you can observe, which is sort of much more mature. Digital analytics is a pretty mature space, and you could see what's happening in great detail. And what's missing is the context for what you're looking at. So I'll give an example. Um, every marketer that runs paid media looks at, say, a landing page conversion rate. So if you're B2B, what percentage of people that land on the page will submit a lead? If you're a consumer, what percentage will buy, sort of a buy conversion rate or an add to cart conversion rate? And so that's set up in every company in the world has that. What they don't have is, it's a 5% lead rate. What should it be? Who is the 5% that submit? Who's the 5% that aren't submitting? So it's all the context around that number that is missing, and it's the context around that number that tells you what you should do. If you just know that 5% of people convert and you want it to be 6%, you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, it's just a number. But when you learn that that people that are price sensitive or that say they're price sensitive are submitting a lead rate at 1%, and people that say that they are like premium service sensitive are converting at 10%, boy, all of a sudden that becomes a bit more actionable. Because then what you could do is say, oh, I'll invest differently. I will tell our agency that drives media to our page, I will tell them that they need to start sending more premium service focused users and stop with these price focused users. And I will be able to measure them, and I'll tell them which campaigns are sending the people we want versus which campaigns are sending the people that we don't want or want less. Or maybe it basically helps you say, oh, I get it. If price-focused users are converting at a much, much lower rate than the average, then what if we created content that actually describes a rational value of this product? And so all of a sudden, this 5% number, which is not inherently actionable, just sort of tells you what's happening. When you link it with what's inside people's minds, and like literally link it, not just run them in parallel simultaneously, then that 5% number becomes way more actionable. And so I think that is one part of where this industry is going, which is much more closely linked. And that's effectively how we were built. It's kind of the fundamental thesis for our company, which is voice of customer data is not very actionable as it stands today, and our job is to make it actionable. So that linking data is one of the key ways to do that. To finish your where do I see things going? More and more companies are doing this 3 levels of learning approach. First is passively allowing users to give feedback if they have it. There are companies that were based on this, like whole companies that only did that. And that's now becoming more of a feature than a company. It's just one of many ways to listen. There's the hypothesis-driven approach that I've been talking about, which is sort of our Pulse Insights' sweet spot. And then there's the measurement and friction part that we started talking about, which is sort of, we described as the old way, but it's not, we're careful to say it's not the bad way, it's just not sufficient. Mm-hmm. So we still think that companies should be trending key metrics that they care about over time. And so we tend to do all 3 of those things with our clients now, and that is what gives you a full picture of what customers want.
I think there was a New Yorker article a year or 2 ago about those little happy buttons that you see in bathrooms at airports and so forth.
Yep.
Like, how was your experience today? And you occasionally see those at other places as well, maybe at the car wash or something. Tell me, what's your perspective on those? It seems sometimes like just very trivial, like you wouldn't get anything out of it. But I remember that New Yorker article talked about how if you're monitoring it in real time and there's a spike in the angry face, you can say, oh, go dispatch someone and see what's wrong with the bathroom. Like, tell me about kind of that kind of measurement in real life, where you see that going.
Yeah, well, I think that's actually, I love those things for exactly that reason. It's very in line with our philosophy and our worldview, which is it takes, a user's just leaving the bathroom and it takes 2 seconds, hopefully after they wash their hands, to tap the button. And it's not so much about any one person, but in aggregate, you really can see the spikes and you can know where to look quickly. And that's pretty much exactly what we do. Now, I will say that that's closer to the score and friction. Like you're only getting a score and you see the score go down. So it's a piece of what we do, but but it uses that micro survey approach where you get a lot of people to give you a little data. So we think that works great. Now on web, in a bathroom, you're not going to actually write something in a kiosk on the way out. So it's appropriate for the channel, but for web, we can get more. We can ask more detailed questions that really get inside people's heads better because of the environment, because of the channel that the user's on.
Now, before Pulse Insights, you started another firm, UberTags, and what led you to start Pulse Insights? What you got interested in this space?
Yeah, sure. So actually, both UberTags and Pulse Insights were driven by patterns and needs that I saw at Amex. So when I was at Amex running a chunk of the website, tags were a huge pain point. We'd try to integrate a new vendor, and it would take something like 60 or 90 days to get a simple tag, or a tag is just a code snippet of JavaScript that's pasted into a page. So it's super easy, ostensibly, to get this live. However, what actually happened was you had to schedule it and wait like 90 days. And what that meant is if you had this vendor that was going to improve your performance, a whole quarter out of the year, you just had to sit there and wait, despite the fact that the work is effectively pasting a code snippet. And so UberTags allowed you to take that 90-day process and turn it into a 90-second process. And it was early days before Google Tag Manager existed. And but basically that concept is now ubiquitous across the entire web. And so that was UberTags. It was sold to X+1 Mac, I don't remember exactly when. And then at the same time, I sort of mentioned that when I was running a product team at Amex, we wanted decisions to make investment decisions based on customer need, but we didn't quite have the tools that allowed us to really do that. We had tools to say that whether people were happier or less happier than last month, but not so much about exactly what we should build. And so that really was the genesis for Pulse Insights. We basically made a bet that we weren't alone, and that others would also value having large access to data at scale about what their customers want and need. So kudos to Amex for inspiring two companies.
That's awesome. So, I mean, that's a really cool example of how, building a company to satisfy a need that you felt yourself. Pretty good strategy. So
I guess it's worked. Yeah.
Jeremy, if people wanted to, reach out, find out more about Pulse Insights, where would you like to direct them if they want to find out more about your company?
Sure. Well, they can go to pulseinsights.com and see some examples and read a little bit about our products. And also while there, they can, if they're interested in seeing a demo, they could just submit a form and we'll reach out and show off what we've built.
Awesome. I feel that for this episode, we should, ask ask listeners here, if you would recommend this podcast to a friend. You can email me Unleashed.
Or
go ahead.
Or
go ahead.
What do you want more of? What do you want less of on your podcast?
Even better. Yeah, that takes it from sort of the friction points to the more context. Like, what do you want more of? What do you want less of on the show? And email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. Jeremy, it was so much fun hearing about your business. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.